I reluctantly agreed to an open marriage with my wife. When I fell in love with... The decision wasn't mine. It never really was. It started on a Friday evening, the air heavy with the scent of her favorite jasmine candles, the ones she always lit before a serious talk. Lena sat across from me, her fingers intertwined, knuckles pale, as she said the words that would unravel the foundation of our marriage. I think we should open our relationship. I swallowed hard. The room, suddenly too small. What? It's not that I don't love you. I do. But I feel caged, stifled, and I don't want to grow resentful. Her eyes were pleading, as if asking for permission to breathe. We've been together since college, Ian. I want to explore, to see what else is out there. Together. I don't want to lose you. Together. As if that made it better. I didn't agree that night. I sat in silence, nodding absent-mindedly while my mind spiraled. But weeks of hushed conversations, tense dinners, and her tear-streaked confessions wore me down. I was terrified of losing her, of her walking out of our lives, of waking up to an empty house and echoes of her laughter. So I agreed. The rules were clear. Complete honesty, no emotional entanglements, no one from our existing circles. It was just fun, she insisted. A way to reignite the passion we had somehow misplaced between bills, work schedules, and the mundanity of routine. I didn't think I could go through with it. But then, I met Sophie. I was hesitant at first, dragging my feet to the rooftop bar, downtown. I almost canceled. But she was magnetic. Wavy auburn hair cascading over one shoulder. A laugh that filled the room. She was nothing like Lena. Impulsive, unpredictable, messy in a way that felt like liberation. I was drawn to her. Not just physically, but the way she saw the world, through a lens of chaotic beauty. Conversations with her were an adventure, spiraling from art to philosophy to absurd hypotheticals that left me breathless from laughing. I knew I was breaking the rules. But I kept seeing her. I kept falling. It didn't take long for Lena to notice. She was the one who suggested the open marriage, but she was also the one who saw the change in me. The late-night texts, the new clothes, the way I hummed while making coffee. Is it her? Lena's voice trembled, eyes glistening. This... Sophie? I tried to lie, but I couldn't. Yes. Her shoulders slumped, a wounded animal retreating. You're in love with her. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. The truth hung heavy between us, an admission I never wanted to make. That wasn't the deal, she whispered, voice cracking. We said no emotions. We promised. I didn't mean to. I didn't think it was possible, but it was. It was painfully, excruciatingly possible. Lena's face hardened, a mask of cold fury replacing the heartbreak. I never thought you'd be the one to break us. She moved out that night. Said she needed space. Time to think. I should have gone after her, fought to fix us, but I didn't. I was paralyzed, torn between two worlds, two loves, two versions of who I was. Weeks passed without a word from Lena. I threw myself into work, into Sophie, trying to drown the guilt. But it haunted me, a phantom whisper in the dark. Then the texts started, anonymous messages, taunting me with snapshots of Sophie at the grocery store, at her favorite cafe, walking her dog. The angles were wrong, too close, too intimate. I showed Sophie, but she brushed it off as coincidence. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the texts kept coming, each one more sinister than the last. A picture of Sophie sleeping, the shadow of a figure reflected in the window. I installed security cameras at her apartment, desperate to protect her, to protect us. But all they captured were eerie silhouettes, figures that vanished before they could be identified. Then, one, Evening, I returned to Sophie's place to find the door ajar. I burst inside, heart pounding, only to find her standing in the living room, face pale, hands trembling. I found this. She handed me a box, small, wrapped in crimson paper. A note attached in Lena's handwriting. You always said I was predictable. Bet you didn't see this coming? Inside the box was a single photograph, Sophie and me tangled in each other's arms, lost in a kiss. But the angle was wrong, taken from the bedroom window through the half-drawn blinds. It couldn't be Lena. She didn't have it in her to stalk, to taunt, to invade our privacy like this. But the notes kept coming, each one more vindictive, more personal, more twisted. Secrets Sophie and I never shared with anyone, details only Lena would know. Then Sophie disappeared. Her apartment was untouched. No signs of struggle. Her phone, left on the coffee table, the screensaver still a photo of us at the beach. I went to the police, filed a report, but they found nothing. No leads, no suspects. I hired a lawyer to investigate my wife's infidelity. After sleepless nights of replaying every conversation, every late night at the office, every subtle change in her behavior, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Lena's betrayal was more than just emotional. It felt calculated, layered with deceit I was only beginning to unravel. I needed answers. But more than that, I needed leverage. If this was headed for divorce, I wouldn't walk away empty-handed. Not after everything we built. That's why I hired Mark Hastings. Mark came highly recommended, ruthless in the courtroom, methodical in his investigations. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't just win cases, he dismantled his opponents piece by piece. Our first meeting was at his office, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. He listened in silence as I laid it all out. Lena's request for an open marriage, her detachment, the anonymous texts, Sophie's disappearance, and the gut-wrenching revelation that Lena was behind it all. Mark leaned back, eyes calculating. "You don't just want a divorce," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "You want to destroy her." I didn't deny it. "All right," he continued, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his desk. "We'll start by tracing the money. Affairs aren't cheap. And if she was playing you, there's a paper trail somewhere. Bank statements, credit cards, even cash withdrawals, we'll find it." He laid out the plan meticulously. Private investigators, digital forensics, interviews with anyone who might know the truth. Nothing would be left to chance. The next few weeks were a blur of surveillance reports, late-night phone calls, and mounting evidence. Mark's team was relentless. They hacked into Lena's hidden accounts, tracked her spending, and pulled phone records that painted a damning picture. There were hotel bookings under fake names, expensive dinners at places she never mentioned, and dozens of calls to a number saved, as J.S. Mark was thorough. He traced the number to Jason Sawyer, a business consultant who had, coincidentally, started working with Lena's firm a year ago. According to his online profile, he was charming, ambitious, married, a perfect affair partner. I followed Mark's advice and kept my distance. It wasn't easy. Every day I fought the urge to confront her, to throw the evidence in her face and demand the truth. But Mark insisted on patience. "We need her to make a mistake," he explained, "to give us something we can use." And then she did. Mark's investigator caught them at a cabin in the woods, a romantic getaway Lena had claimed was a work retreat. The photos were damning. Lena and Jason tangled together on the porch, laughing, kissing, completely unaware of the camera's watchful eye. When Mark showed me the pictures, my hands shook. But it wasn't just anger. It was betrayal, sharp and cold, slicing through me with a pain I didn't think was possible. "She's been lying to me for months," I whispered, the realization sinking in. "All that talk about an open marriage, she just wanted to justify this, to make it my fault." Mark nodded, his face grim. That's how manipulators work. But now we've got her. We compiled everything. Bank statements, phone records, photos, even text messages Mark's team recovered from her cloud storage. It was airtight, indisputable. Lena had been playing me all along, building her life with Jason while keeping me on the hook, but the final blow came when Mark uncovered something I never saw coming. Lena and Jason weren't just lovers. They were partners. In business. Jason wasn't just some consultant. He was her co-founder in a startup she'd been funneling our savings into for months, a company she planned to launch after the divorce once she'd drained me dry. She planned this, I realized, my voice hollow. The open marriage, the distance, everything. She was setting me up. Mark's eyes were cold. She didn't just betray you. She conspired against you. It was more than infidelity. It was fraud, theft, deception on a scale I couldn't fathom. And she almost got away with it. Almost. Mark filed for divorce the next day, hitting her with charges of financial misconduct and infidelity. We froze her accounts, subpoenaed Jason's financials, and sent a cease and desist to her startup investors. Lena was blindsided. The first confrontation was brutal. She stormed into the house, eyes blazing, accusations flying. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, as if she were the victim. "How could I?" I laughed, the sound bitter. "You lied! You cheated! You stole from me! And you thought you'd get away with it!" I threw the photos on the table, watching her face drain of color. "Did you really think I was that blind?" Her mouth opened, then closed, the words dying on her lips. For once, she was speechless. "I trusted you," I continued, my voice breaking. "I loved you. And you played me for a fool." Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't move me. I saw them for what they were. The investigation of my wife's betrayal. The text lingered in my mind, taunting me with its ominous promise. "You thought you won, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot." I showed it to Mark. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. "We need to trace this. Find out who's sending these threats." His team got to work, combing through phone records and digital trails. But whoever sent it was careful. Untraceable burner phone, no location data, no name. I should have known better than to think it would be that easy. Lena always had contingency plans, layers upon layers of deception. A week later, another text arrived. "Hope you're enjoying the victory. I wonder how long it will last." It didn't make sense. She lost everything. Her reputation, her startup, even Jason. What more could she want? Then Mark called with news. "You're not going to like this," he warned. "We just found out Lena transferred a significant amount of money offshore before we froze her accounts." "What?" My heart raced. "How much?" "Enough to fund a fresh start," Mark said grimly. "She was planning this long before we caught on, and I think she's using that money to come after you." I didn't understand. I had won, hadn't I? I exposed her lies, dismantled her schemes, and took back everything she tried to steal. So why was she still playing the game? Mark explained, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "Lena's not just trying to ruin you. She's trying to destroy you. Financially, professionally, maybe even personally. And with the money she's hiding, she can do it." It was war, and she was playing for keeps. Mark hired a forensic accountant, a specialist who could track Lena's hidden funds. We dug through offshore accounts, shell companies, and international transactions. But Lena was meticulous. Every trail ended in a dead end. Every clue led to another layer of secrecy. Then Mark found something. A series of wire transfers to a consulting firm called Vanguard Solutions. "Recognize the name?" he asked, his eyes sharp. I shook my head. Mark's face darkened. "You should. It's owned by Richard Connolly." My blood ran cold. Richard. Connolly, Lena's ex-boss, the same man who mysteriously resigned after she was promoted. The one she claimed was old news when I asked about him. I remembered the way she spoke about him once, admiration in her voice. Richard's brilliant. He sees opportunities where others see obstacles. I thought nothing of it back then. Just another work story. But it was more than that. Much more. Mark did some digging. Vanguard Solutions wasn't just a consulting firm. It was a front, a shell company used to funnel money through offshore accounts. Richard was helping Lena hide her assets, shielding her from the financial fallout. Of the divorce, they were in this together. She was never working alone, I realized, the truth sinking in. Richard's been helping her the whole time. Mark nodded. And if I had to guess, he's the one sending those texts. He's helping her plot her next move. My hands clenched. What does she want? Mark looked at me, his eyes cold. Everything. The next few weeks were chaos. Lena went on the offensive, filing false harassment claims, spreading rumors to damage my reputation, even leaking private messages to make me look like the villain. She was rewriting the narrative, painting herself as the victim and me as the monster. The smear campaign hit hard. Clients pulled out, business deals collapsed, and old friends turned cold. I was losing everything, and I couldn't fight back without looking guilty. But Mark wasn't done yet. He hired investigators to dig into Richard's past. They found enough dirt to bury him: fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. And worse, they found proof of his involvement with Lena. Secret meetings, late-night phone calls, even vacation photos of them together, looking very much like lovers. They're more than partners, Mark said, his voice filled with contempt. They've been playing you from the start. It all made sense. The open marriage, the distance, the lies. Lena wanted out, but she didn't want to leave empty-handed. So she manipulated me, made me question my sanity, all while planning her escape with Richard. But they made one mistake. They underestimated me. Mark filed charges against Richard for financial fraud, using the evidence we found. He also subpoenaed Lena, forcing her to testify under oath. She tried to dodge it, but Mark was relentless. When she finally showed up in court, she looked different, colder, more calculated. Gone was the woman I once loved, replaced by a stranger who wore her face like a mask. She took the stand, eyes locked on mine, and lied through her teeth, claimed I was abusive, controlling, paranoid, that she only wanted an open marriage because I was neglecting her. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the judge watching me with suspicion. But Mark stayed, calm. When it was his turn, he tore through her lies like tissue paper. He showed the texts, the bank statements, the evidence of her betrayal. The first clue was so small, so seemingly insignificant, that I almost missed it. A charge on our joint credit card statement for a hotel downtown. It was listed under her name, dated 3 weeks ago. I stared at it, my mind racing. She told me she was at a work seminar that day, an all-day event. Why would she need a hotel room? I confronted her that night, keeping my tone casual. Hey, I saw a charge for the Grandview Hotel last month. Was that for the seminar? Her eyes flicked up just for a second before she smiled. Oh, yeah. The company booked a conference room there. I must have grabbed lunch at the hotel restaurant. I'll get it reimbursed. She was lying. I felt it in my bones, even as she moved on to talk about her day. That little flicker of fear in her eyes, she was hiding something. The next clue came from her phone. I never meant to check, but she left it on the kitchen counter while she showered. It buzzed with a message. I glanced at the screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? No name, just a number. My chest tightened. A cold wave of dread washing over me. My hand shook as I put her phone down, stepping away as if it burned me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message, heard her voice, replayed every excuse she made in the past year. Late nights at the office, girls' night out, weekend workshops. It all sounded so plausible, so innocent, until now. I needed proof, real proof, not just a gut feeling or a suspicious text. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I hired a private investigator. His name was Sam, a no-nonsense guy with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't ask why I suspected her, just took the details and promised to keep me updated. The waiting was hell. Every day, every minute felt like a lifetime. I watched her laugh, smile, kiss me goodnight, all while wondering who else she was kissing when I wasn't around. A week later, Sam called. His voice was grim. "I've got what you asked for. You're not going to like it." We met at his office, a cramped room above a coffee shop. He handed me a folder, his expression sympathetic. "I took photos over the last week, followed her to 3 different locations. Same guy every time." My hand shook as I opened the folder. There she was, my wife of 10 years, smiling at another man, laughing with him at a cafe, holding his hand in a movie theater, kissing him outside his apartment building. I stared at the pictures, my heart breaking with each one. She looked so happy, so at ease, like she was with me in the early days of our marriage. But the worst part wasn't seeing her with him. It was seeing the way she looked at him, like he was her whole world, like she was in love. Sam's voice broke through my daze. His name's Michael Foster. Works in her office, divorced, no kids. They've been seeing each other for at least 6 months, maybe longer. 6 months. While I was planning our anniversary trip, she was sneaking around with him. While I was working late to pay off our mortgage, she was meeting him in hotel rooms. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to destroy those photos and pretend I never saw them. But the truth was there, staring back at me. I couldn't run from it. I asked Sam for everything he had, text messages, emails, any proof I could use. I wasn't sure if I wanted a divorce or just a confrontation, but I needed to be ready. He delivered. A week later, I had enough evidence to shatter my entire world. Messages between them, filled with passion and longing, emails planning secret, getaways, photos of them together, laughing, holding each other, living a life she never shared with me. The betrayal cut deeper than I imagined. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the deception, the years of trust shattered in an instant. I spent nights staring at the evidence, my heart breaking over and over. I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to accept that the woman I loved, the woman I vowed to spend my life with, was capable of this. But she was. And now I had to decide what to do next. Confront her, demand answers, file for divorce, or pretend I never found out just to keep my life from falling apart. There was no easy answer. No path that didn't lead to pain. But the choice was mine, and mine alone. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same. The confrontation. I waited for the right moment, though I wasn't sure there was such a thing. Every time I looked at her, I saw those pictures in my mind, her smiling at him, holding his hand, kissing him like he was her world, like I didn't exist. It was a Saturday evening when I finally did it. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, laughing at something on the screen, probably a text from him. My stomach churned, but I kept my voice steady. "We need to talk." She looked up, her smile fading at the seriousness in my tone. "What's wrong?" I sat down across from her, placing the folder on the coffee table. "Between us." Her eyes flicked to it, a flash of fear crossing her face before she quickly masked it with confusion. "What's that?" I opened it, spreading the photos out like cards in a game I never wanted to play. Her face went pale, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. "For 6 months," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around, cheating." The word tasted bitter, sour on my tongue. "With him." I pointed to the man in the photos. Michael Foster, her lover. She stared at the pictures, her hands trembling. I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed, the sound hollow and broken. "Explain what? How you've been living a double life? How you've been pretending to be my wife while giving your heart to someone else?" Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel pity, not this time. I never meant to hurt you. Too late for that. My chest tightened, a sharp pain radiating through me. Why, Emily? Why did you do it? She looked down, wiping her tears. I was lonely. You were always working, always busy. I felt like I was invisible, like you didn't see me anymore. I clenched my fists, anger boiling beneath the pain. So? You found someone who did? And instead of talking to me, you lied. You betrayed me. Her voice broke. I didn't. Want to lose you? I laughed bitterly. You already did. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I watched her shoulders shake, tears falling onto the photos that exposed her lies. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered all the times she looked me in the eyes and lied, every kiss, every "I love you" tainted with deceit. What now? She whispered, her voice small and broken. I looked at her, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, now a stranger before me. I don't know, I admitted, my voice hollow. But I can't look at you right now. I can't be around you. Her face crumbled, and she reached out, but I pulled away. Don't. Just don't. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I need time. I need space, and I need you to stay away from me. She sobbed, her body shaking as she curled into herself. But I didn't look back. I walked out the door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. Away from the lies, the betrayal, the pain. As I drove through the empty streets, my mind raced with questions I didn't have answers to. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Or was this the end of us I didn't know? All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. And the woman I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who shattered my heart. And I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The aftermath, I drove aimlessly that night, the city lights blurring as tears clouded my vision. My chest ached, my heart shattered beyond repair. I ended up at a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. The room was cold, impersonal, stained carpet, flickering light, but it was quiet. I collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion overtaking me, and for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I let myself break. I cried until there were no tears left, until my body was numb and my mind empty. Sleep came eventually, heavy and dreamless. When I woke, sunlight was seeping through the worn-out curtains, and the reality of my life crashed back down on me. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, had betrayed me. Not just with another man, but with lies upon lies, layers of deceit that unraveled everything we built together. I sat up, my head pounding. I needed answers. I needed to understand how she could do this to me, to us. But first, I needed a plan. Texted Sam, the private investigator. I need everything you have on them, and I want to know how long it's been going on. His reply came swiftly. Meet me at my office in an hour. There's more you should see. I checked out of the motel, my body running on autopilot. I couldn't go home. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face her again. Not after seeing her fall apart in front of me, pleading for forgiveness with tears that felt as fake as her promises. Sam was waiting when I arrived, his face grim. He handed me a second folder thicker than the first. I did some digging after you called. It's worse than we thought. I opened the folder, my heart sinking with every page. Emails, text messages, voicemails. They'd been seeing each other for over a year, longer than I could have imagined. They went on trips together, stayed in hotels, celebrated birthdays. He even bought her gifts, expensive jewelry that she must have hidden somewhere in our house. My stomach turned. All those nights she came home late, blaming traffic or last-minute meetings. All those weekends she said she was at workshops. It was all a lie. But the worst part was the messages. The way she talked to him. The love, the passion, the affection, all the things she used to give me. I could almost hear her voice as I read the words. I wish I could be with you every night. I hate lying to him, but I can't lose you. I love you, Michael. I've never felt this way before. I closed the folder, my hands shaking. I felt sick, betrayed, humiliated. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was in love with him. I looked up at Sam, my vision blurry. Did she ever plan to leave me? Sam hesitated, then nodded. There are a few messages where she mentions it. She was scared of hurting you, of what people would think, but she was considering it. The ground shifted beneath me. She was going to leave me. All the years we spent together, the promises we made, they meant nothing to her. Nothing. I clenched, my fists, the pain morphing into anger. I want a lawyer. I want a divorce, and I want to make sure she doesn't get a damn thing. Sam nodded, his expression hardening. I know a guy. He's ruthless. He'll make sure you come out on top. I took a shaky breath, my decision solidifying. Set it up and keep digging. I want to know everything. Every lie. Every detail. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not after everything she'd done. It was time to fight back. Facing her lies, I went home that night, my body buzzing with anger and adrenaline. I was ready for a fight, ready to confront her with every piece of evidence I had. But when I walked through the door, the house was dark and silent. Her car was gone. Checked our bedroom, the closet, the bathroom. Half her clothes were missing. Her jewelry box was empty. She took her favorite perfume, her laptop, her phone charger. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head spinning. She left me, without a word, without a note. She ran away before I could confront her with the truth. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, my anger growing with every unanswered ring. I texted her, demanding answers. No response. It felt like she was mocking me, running to him after I exposed her lies. How could she be so cruel, so cowardly? I threw my phone against the wall, the screen shattering on impact. I didn't care. Everything was broken. My marriage, my trust, my life. I sat there in the dark, the weight of her betrayal suffocating me. She didn't just cheat, she abandoned me. It was over. I was alone, and the woman I once loved was gone, lost to a stranger who never really existed. The search for truth days passed without a word from her. I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need her lies, her excuses. But the silence was crushing. I needed closure. I needed to understand why she did this to me. I threw myself into the investigation, working with Sam to piece together her double life. He traced her credit card transactions, mapped her locations, even hacked into her cloud storage. Every new piece of evidence was like a knife to my chest. Hotel bookings under fake names. Receipts for gifts she bought him. Photos from their trips, beaches, city skylines, romantic dinners. She looked so happy, so carefree, smiling at him the way she used to smile at me. My hands shook as I looked at the pictures. It was like watching my life from the outside, seeing the woman I loved live a fantasy while I was kept in the dark. Sam called one evening, his voice tense. I found her. My heart raced. Where? She's staying with him. Michael Foster. They're living together in his apartment downtown. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. She didn't even try to hide it, did she? Sam hesitated. No, it looks like she moved in right after she left you. She was planning this for a while. I closed my eyes, my chest tightening. It was all premeditated. She didn't just cheat. She built a new life without me, and she did it with him. I need to see her, I said, my voice cold. I need to hear her say it to my face. Sam warned me against it, said it would only make things worse, but I was past caring. I needed answers. The confrontation. The next day, I drove to Michael's apartment. It was in a fancy high-rise downtown, all glass and steel. A far cry from the cozy home we shared, filled with memories she left behind. I stood outside the building, for a while staring up at the windows, wondering which one was theirs. Did she laugh with him up there? Did she cuddle up to him the way she used to with me? The thought made me sick. I forced myself inside, taking the elevator to the 14th floor. My heart pounded with every step as I walked down the hallway. Her car was parked outside. She was here. I stood in front of the door, my fist hovering inches away. I didn't know what I was going to say, how I was going to confront her. But I needed to see her, to look her in the eyes and demand the truth. I knocked. The door opened, and there she was. Her hair was tied back, her face free of makeup. She was wearing his shirt, an oversized button-up that hung loosely on her frame. Her eyes widened, shock flashing across her face. "What? What are you doing here?" I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "What am I doing here? I should be asking you that." Her face turned pale, and she glanced over her shoulder, panic in her eyes. "This isn't the place. We should talk somewhere else." "Why?" I snapped, pushing past her into the apartment. It was clean, modern, filled with sleek furniture and expensive decor. Her shoes were by the door, her purse on the counter. She'd made herself at home. "You weren't even going to tell me, were you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You were just going to disappear, pretend I didn't exist?" She closed the door, her shoulders sagging. "I didn't know how to face you. After everything." I turned to her, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. "How long?" She looked at the floor, her hands trembling. "A year." I felt like the wind was knocked out of me. A year. 12 months of lies. I'd been living in a fantasy while she was building a life with him. Why? My voice cracked, the pain breaking through the anger. "Why did you do it?" She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I was lonely." "You were always working, always stressed. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. And then I met him, and he made me feel alive." I took a step back, her words hitting me like a punch. "So, it's my fault? You're blaming me for your cheating?" "No!" She rushed toward me, her eyes pleading. "I'm not blaming you. I made mistakes. I was selfish, but I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I married was gone. This was a stranger, someone who shattered my heart without a second thought. "You lost me the moment you lied," I said, my voice cold. "The moment you let him into our life." She sobbed, covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Sorry doesn't fix this. I turned to leave, my chest burning. "I loved you. I trusted you. And you destroyed everything." I walked out, her cries echoing behind me. The door closed, cutting off the sound, but the pain stayed with me, heavy and sharp. As I walked down the hallway, my vision blurred with tears. It was really over. The life we built, the dreams we shared, it was all gone. I was alone, and she was never coming back. A new beginning. The days grew lighter, the nights less suffocating. I learned to live with the silence, to make peace with the emptiness. The ache of betrayal was still there, but it no longer consumed me. It became a scar, a reminder of what I survived. I poured my energy into rebuilding my life. I took on new projects at work, threw myself into hobbies I once neglected. I started running, the rhythm of my feet on the pavement grounding me, pushing me forward. Friends coaxed me out of my shell, inviting me to dinners, to outings. At first, I was reluctant, haunted by memories of happier times. But eventually, I let them in. I laughed again. It felt foreign, like rediscovering a part of myself I thought was lost. One evening, at a friend's gathering, I met her. Sophia. She wasn't flashy or dramatic, just warm, genuine, her laughter bright and infectious. She didn't pry, didn't ask about my past. She just listened, her eyes kind, her presence comforting. We exchanged numbers. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I wasn't ready to love again. But she became a friend, a constant, someone who helped me rediscover joy. Echoes of the past, I would be lying if I said I didn't think about her, my ex-wife. Some days, the memories were sharp, cutting through my peace. I wondered where she was, if she was still with him, if she regretted the choices she made. Once curiosity got the better of me, I unblocked her number, scrolled through our old messages. I found myself hovering over her social media, staring at pictures of her smiling, living a life that no longer included me. It hurt, seeing her happy, seeing her move on. But I knew I had to let go. She made her choice, and I made mine. I blocked her again, deleting the remnants of our past. It was time to stop looking back. An unexpected encounter. It was a cold afternoon when I ran into her, completely by accident. I was at the coffee shop near my new place, ordering my usual when I heard her voice. I turned, and there she was, standing, just a few feet away, her hair shorter, her face thinner. She looked at me, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment we just stood there, frozen in time, memories flooding back. "Hi," she finally said, her voice shaky. "It's been a while." I nodded, my chest tight. "Yeah, it has." There was an awkward silence. She shifted her weight, glancing down. "You look good. Different." I moved. "Started over," I replied, my voice guarded. I didn't owe her any more explanations. She looked away, guilt flickering across her face. "I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry for everything." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "You made your choice." Her eyes glistened. "I did, and I have to live with that." I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I realized it didn't matter anymore. Her reasons wouldn't change the past. "I hope you're happy," I said, and I meant it. Even if she broke me, I didn't want to carry that hatred anymore. It was too heavy. She wiped a tear, nodding. "I'm trying to be." I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm, her grip trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I loved you, in my own way." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the brokenness beneath the surface. She was just as lost as I was, but I couldn't save her. I had to save myself. "Goodbye," I whispered, gently pulling away. I walked out of the coffee shop, the cold air hitting my face, a strange sense of freedom washing over me. It was over. Really over. Moving Oni didn't look back. I moved forward, one step at a time. I continued to see Sophia cautiously, carefully. She was patient, understanding, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready. We spent hours talking, sharing stories, dreams, fears. She became my anchor, my reminder that life could be beautiful again. One evening, we sat on my balcony watching the city lights. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her warmth chasing away the cold. "I never thought I could feel this way again," I admitted, my voice soft. "I never thought I could trust again." She looked up at me, her eyes sincere. "I'm not her," And I'll never hurt you like she did. I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I believed someone again. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to define me. I could choose to live, to love, to hope. I could choose to move on, and I did. The end. A new chapter. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. My life slowly took on a new rhythm, one that no longer revolved around bitterness or pain. I found myself laughing more, enjoying the little things again. The warmth of the sun on my face, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the sound of Sophia's laughter echoing through my apartment. We took things slow, letting our relationship grow naturally, without the weight of expectations. We went on long walks, shared quiet dinners, watched movies curled up on the couch. It was simple, effortless, healing. I opened up to her piece by piece, revealing the wounds of my past. I told her about the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt. She listened, never judging, her hand warm in mine. "I can't change what happened to you," she said one night, her voice gentle. "But I can promise you that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." And she kept that promise. Echoes that faded. There were still moments when the past haunted me. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, disoriented, remnants of old nightmares clinging to my mind. Memories of her, my ex-wife, would surface without warning, triggered by a song, a place, a scent, but they didn't hurt as much anymore. They were just echoes, reminders of who I used to be, of how far I'd come. I stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering about her life. I realized that it no longer mattered. She was part of my story, but she wasn't my story. I was free. An unexpected message. One afternoon, as I was organizing old files, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and felt my heart skip. It was her, my ex-wife. The message was brief. "I'm sorry. I hope you're okay." I stared at the words. 1,000 emotions swirling inside me, anger, sadness, nostalgia, and then nothing, just calm acceptance. I typed a simple reply. "I'm okay. I hope you are too. Take care." I hit send, then deleted the conversation. I didn't need to keep it. The past was the past, and it was time to let it rest. Growing together, with each passing day, my bond with Sophia grew stronger. We navigated the delicate dance of learning each other's habits, quirks, dreams. We faced challenges, had arguments, worked through them. I learned to trust again, to open my heart without fear. Sophia never gave me a reason to doubt her, never played games or kept secrets. She was honest, consistent, loyal. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset, she took my hand, her eyes serious. "I don't want to rush you, but I need to know. Where do you see us going?" I looked at her, at the woman who helped me rebuild my life, who stood by me without hesitation. I realized that she was my future. "I see us together," I answered, my voice steady. "I see us building something real, something lasting." Tears glistened in her eyes as she smiled. That's all I needed to hear. Moving forward, we didn't rush into marriage or grand commitments. We just kept growing, kept loving. I learned to cherish the present, to let go of the fear of the future. We traveled, explored new places, created memories that were ours and ours alone. We built a life filled with laughter, with hope, with love. I never forgot what happened to me. I never forgot the pain, the betrayal, but I didn't let it control me. I didn't let it define my future. I chose to forgive, not just her, but myself. I forgave myself for being broken, for being vulnerable, for loving and losing. I chose to be happy. The beginning of forever. One evening, as the city lights sparkled below us, I looked at Sophia, her face bathed in golden light. She turned to me, her eyes curious. What? I smiled, my heart full. Nothing, just thank you for everything. She leaned in, her lips brushing mine. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you let me in. I realized that she wasn't just my new beginning. She was my forever. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The end. And a new beginning. A new beginning. Again, as the seasons changed, so did the landscape of my heart. Life with Sophia had become a beautiful routine. Morning coffees shared in the quiet of our apartment, weekends spent exploring the city, and quiet evenings spent cooking dinner together. Each day felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place, and I reveled in the simplicity of it. But the past has a way of creeping in, no matter how far you've come. It was a rainy afternoon when I received an unexpected call. The number wasn't familiar, but there was something about it that made my heart skip. My hand hovered over the phone, uncertain, before I answered. Hello? Is this the man whose wife was unfaithful? The voice on the other end was smooth, calm, but it struck me with a chill I couldn't shake. Who is this? I demanded, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Don't worry. I'm not here to cause trouble, the voice continued. But I think you deserve to know what really happened. The truth about your wife. I felt the blood rush to my ears, my pulse quickening. My thoughts spiraled as the rain pattered against the window. I think you owe it to yourself to hear what I have to say. It might change everything. The voice paused, then added, It's about your ex-wife and the man who helped her destroy. You. I gripped the phone tighter, my throat dry. The last thing I wanted was to revisit the past, but curiosity gnawed at me. I'm listening. The revelations. The voice on the phone spoke in riddles, dropping cryptic details, bits and pieces. That didn't quite add up, but enough to make my heart race. It turned out that Claire wasn't just involved with David Mercer. There were other players, other schemes I never saw coming. She was never the victim, you know. Not like she wanted you to believe, the voice continued. She had a plan, a very elaborate one. And Mercer wasn't the only one in on it. The name struck me like a bolt of lightning. Elliot Vance. Elliot Vance? I repeated, my mind reeling. Vance was the corporate fixer, the ghost in the shadows. A name I hadn't heard in years and one I thought was buried. Yes, he was always lurking in the background. But what you didn't know is that Claire was using him, manipulating him. And Mercer, well, he was just a pawn. The truth was like an acid burn spreading through my chest. The pieces I thought I had put together had only scratched the surface. I never wanted to involve you, the voice continued, the words dripping with malice. But now it's time for you to know the full story. You're going to find that your wife's betrayal goes deeper than you imagined. The line went dead before I could say another word. Confrontation on the horizon. Sophia noticed the change in me immediately when I returned home that evening. I sat in the kitchen, staring at my phone, the events of the call still replaying in my mind. What happened? She asked, her voice laced with concern. I looked up at her, struggling to explain. I got a call about Claire. Her brow furrowed. What about her? Something I never knew. There's more to the story. More than I thought. Sophia sat down across from me, her expression soft but unwavering. Do you want to go after her? Find out what really happened? I shook my head slowly, my chest tightening. I don't know. I don't know if I can go down that path again. Sophia reached across the table, taking my hand. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go after her or dig up the past if you don't want to, but I'll be here, whatever you decide. I exhaled, feeling the weight of her words. Maybe I didn't need to unravel the past completely, but something inside me, some lingering thread of unresolved justice, told me I had to know the truth. The truth uncovered, I hired a private investigator, a new one this time, someone who specialized in corporate corruption. I wasn't about to trust anyone who might have ties to the old network. The investigation unfolded in surprising ways, revealing a web of deceit, manipulations, and betrayal that went far deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just Claire and Mercer working together. Vance had been orchestrating an elaborate financial scheme, using Claire as a pawn to dismantle my career and reputation. And there were others, silent partners in the shadows, people who had their own reasons for wanting me to fall. But as I dug deeper, I started to realize something unsettling. The more I uncovered, the more I questioned whether I had been manipulated, not just by Claire, but by everyone involved. Was my desire for revenge making me blind to my own role in all of this? The questions lingered in the back of my mind as I moved forward. What did I really want? The truth? Justice? Or peace? The final decision. The investigation ended up unearthing everything I needed to know. I found the evidence, the paper trail that tied Claire, Mercer, and Vance together. It was undeniable. But instead of feeling victorious, I felt empty. Sophia had been right. The calm, after the storm time, has a strange way of healing wounds. What once felt like a never-ending battle between myself and the ghosts of my past gradually became just that. Something of the past. The dark days of betrayal, of deceit, faded into distant memories, no longer ruling my thoughts. I could finally breathe without that crushing weight in my chest. I'd let go of the need for vengeance, the compulsion to track down every twisted detail of Claire's actions. What good would it have done, really? The truth had already come out, and those responsible would live with their consequences, whatever they may be. What mattered now was the life I was building, piece by piece. Sophia stood by my side every step of the way, never once questioning my decisions, never once pushing me. She knew when to speak and when to listen. And that, I realized, was everything. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world felt at peace, when Sophia and I sat on the couch, our hands intertwined. The soft glow of the evening light cast shadows across the room, and the hum of the city was distant and comforting. "I've been thinking," Sophia said, her voice gentle but serious. I turned to her, my curiosity piqued. "About what?" "About us." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "About where we go from here." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were already here?" She chuckled softly, but there was a spark of something more in her eyes. "We are. But I think it's time we make it official. In a way, that means something." I didn't need to ask what she meant. We had been talking about the future for a while now, what it might look like, what we wanted from it. But hearing her say it out loud, it felt like the last missing piece falling into place. "I love you," I said, my heart swelling with the truth of it. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "I love you too," she replied, her smile softening. "And I want to build a future with you. I want to make all of this real." Her words hung in the air, sweet and full of promise. My heart raced, not with fear, but with the excitement of knowing that after everything, I had found my person, someone who made the world feel right again. We spent the rest of the night talking, dreaming, imagining a life without the shadows of betrayal hanging over us. There would always be scars, but those scars were part of the story that brought us here. Together. A new step forward. A month later, we took that next step. I proposed to Sophia in a small, quiet ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it was perfect in its simplicity. She said yes with a laugh that felt like the sun breaking through a storm cloud, and with that, we began to build our life. The following years passed in a blur of love, joy, and even occasional heartache, but nothing like before. We faced challenges, as any couple does, but each one was met with understanding, communication, and a mutual desire to see each other grow. We learned what it meant to truly trust again, not just each other, but ourselves. I still carried the weight of my past with me, but it was no longer a burden. It was a part of me, but it didn't define me. And Sophia, she made it possible for me to see a new future. A future where I wasn't living in the shadow of someone else's mistakes. The final chapter. And so we moved forward, no longer weighed down by the past, no longer trapped by the chains of betrayal. We embraced the unknown, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. I learned that some battles aren't meant to be fought. Some, like the ones I had with Claire, were only about letting go. And once I stopped chasing the ghosts of yesterday, I discovered something far more valuable, a chance at real happiness. It wasn't a perfect story, but then again, no story ever is. But it was our story. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. The end. The ripple effect years passed, and while life became more stable, there was something I hadn't anticipated. The ripple effect. It wasn't just the past that lingered in quiet corners of my mind, but how it shaped my future, how it shaped us. Sophia and I had built a life of trust, but we both knew that nothing was perfect. No one could simply erase the scars we carried, not just from Claire, but from everything that had led us to this point. It had been an arduous journey, filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and moments of intense personal growth. Still, the old wounds didn't disappear. They faded, they softened, but they never truly vanished. One evening, months after our wedding, I received a letter. The envelope was simple, plain, but it made my stomach drop the moment I saw the return address. It was from Claire. I hadn't heard from her in years, and I had made peace with that silence, convinced she was long gone from my life. But the letter felt like a ghost stepping back into the room. I handed it to Sophia without saying a word, my hands trembling as I watched her break the seal. "What is it?" she asked, her tone cautious. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "It's from Claire." Sophia's eyes widened, her expression unreadable. "What does she want?" I didn't know, but a sense of foreboding crept over me. Sophia opened the letter and began to read. As I watched her face change, shifting from curiosity to confusion, I felt a knot tightening in my chest. "I don't understand this," she muttered, handing me the letter. It read, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened between us. I know what I did was unforgivable. But there's something I need to tell you. Something you never knew. I've changed. But there are truths that, even now, weigh heavily on my conscience. The truth that someone else has been playing the game, all along. Someone who is far more dangerous than I ever was." The rest of the letter was a jumble of half-revealed secrets, cryptic messages and warnings that only left more questions than answers. It was clear that Claire was no longer the person I once knew, and this letter wasn't just an apology. It felt like a final piece to a puzzle that had been missing for far too long. The return of the unknown. The mention of another player, someone even more dangerous than Claire, stirred something deep within me. The past had always been a maze of shadows, with Claire's betrayal at its center. But now, it seemed as though the truth was finally coming into focus. "Do you think we should respond?" Sophia asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "No," I replied, my decision swift. "Not yet." But as the days passed, the question remained in the back of my mind. Who was this new person? Who was behind Claire's manipulations all along? And why now, after everything had settled, did she feel the need to drag us back into this world of lies and deceit? I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. It was merely a new chapter, and the stakes were higher than ever. The investigation begins again. Despite the peace I had worked so hard to build, the truth lingered like a shadow, creeping into my thoughts during quiet moments. I couldn't let this new mystery go unresolved, especially not with the unsettling tone of Claire's letter. I hired a new investigator, someone more specialized, more discreet. They were a professional in the world of corporate espionage, someone with access to resources I could never have imagined. Months of work led to startling revelations. The person Claire had warned about was none other than an influential figure from my own past, someone I had trusted. The connections slowly unraveled, the network of deceit wider and more complex than I had ever realized. A corporate conspiracy, covert and insidious, had been lurking beneath the surface of everything I had once thought secure. And as the pieces fell into place, a horrifying realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about Claire. It had always been about power, about destroying me from the inside out. Claire had been nothing but a pawn, a means to an end. The final showdown. The investigation led to an inevitable confrontation. The person behind the entire scheme was someone I never would have expected, a colleague, a business partner I had trusted for years. They had been playing both sides, working with Claire to bring me down. The connections between the corporate world and Claire's manipulations were clearer now, and the betrayal cut deeper than any personal betrayal could. This time, there would be no avoiding it. I was face to face with the one person I had trusted most. Someone who had shaped my career and my life for so long. You never saw it coming, did you? They sneered, their face cold and unrepentant. I didn't, I admitted, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. But I see it now. The confrontation was intense, filled with accusations and denials, the truths unraveling. The weight of the past months turned into years, and though the wounds of the past had scarred, they had healed in a way that made me stronger, more resilient. Sophia and I had built something genuine, something I could finally trust. But just when I thought that the past was nothing more than a distant shadow, it showed up on my doorstep again, uninvited and unexpected. It was late on a Wednesday evening when the knock came. I opened the door to find a man in his early 40s, wearing a suit that seemed just a bit too expensive for comfort. His expression was all business, but the air around him felt thick with unspoken truths. He introduced himself as a lawyer, representing someone I knew too well. Claire, I said, the name slipping from my mouth like it had never left. The man nodded solemnly. I have a message for you from her. She's asking for your help. I felt the ground beneath me shift. Despite everything, despite the years of peace and the life I'd created, something in me recoiled at the thought of Claire asking for anything. She had taken so much from me, from both of us. Sophia, sensing the tension, stepped into the room, her presence steady and unwavering. She didn't need to ask. She just knew. "What is this about?" she asked, her tone sharp but controlled. The lawyer glanced at her, a momentary hesitation in his eyes. "It's complicated," he said. "Claire's in trouble, and she needs you to help clear her name." I could barely process his words. Claire, the woman who had betrayed me so completely, was now asking me to help her, to clear her name? The audacity, the sheer arrogance. It felt like everything I'd worked for was being threatened again, pulled back into the murky depths of her deceitful world. "What kind of trouble?" I demanded, my voice low, a mix of curiosity and disbelief. He hesitated again before answering. "She's been arrested. Fraud charges. The kind of thing that could ruin her life if she doesn't get help." Sophia's grip tightened on my arm, her fingers digging into me, as though sensing the storm that was about to break loose. "Why come to you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What does she expect from him? The lawyer sighed, as though this was something he was forced to say. She believes you owe her, that you're the only one who can help her. She's claiming the whole thing was manipulated by others. She wants you to investigate, to find the truth. I stared at him, my mind racing. Everything in me screamed to refuse, to shut the door and never look back. But I knew what this meant. This wasn't just about Claire. This was about finishing something I hadn't even realized was left unfinished. It was about reclaiming the final pieces of my past. Sophia didn't need to say anything, her eyes already telling me everything I needed to hear. She knew this was a dangerous path, and she didn't want me to go down it. But she also knew me too well, knew that I needed closure, that I needed to understand once and for all what had really happened. I'll do it, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Sophia's expression didn't change. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, knowing I was already too deep in this to turn back. The investigation reopened. I hired another investigator, someone discreet, someone who could dig deep into the mess that Claire had gotten herself tangled in. This time I wasn't just going in blind. I knew the stakes. I had learned the hard way how deceptive appearances could be. What I found wasn't what I expected. Claire wasn't alone in this mess. She had once again been a pawn in a larger game, a game that involved old enemies, financial schemes, and a new web of lies that was more dangerous than anything I could have imagined. Claire, it seemed, had been targeted, not by a random enemy, but by the very people who had once used her to try to destroy me. The corporate sharks I had once trusted, the ones I thought were long gone, were back, and they had entangled Claire in their latest plot. But the deeper I dug, the more I began to see a twisted pattern emerging. Claire had been part of the game, for years unknowingly playing into the hands of those who sought to take everything from me. She had been a puppet, just as I had been. The final confrontation, it wasn't just about helping her anymore. It was about stopping a cycle that never seemed to end. I needed answers, but not for Claire's sake, for my own, for Sophia's, for our future. The meeting with Claire was set in a small, nondescript office on the edge of town. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She sat there looking smaller than I remembered, her face lined with worry and guilt. I didn't want this, Claire said quietly, her voice cracking. I didn't want to drag you into it again, but I don't know who else to turn to. I studied her, the woman who had once shattered everything I held dear. The lingering echo life, it seemed, was finally starting to calm down. The shadows of the past had receded into the distance, and yet something still lingered in the back of my mind. It wasn't regret. No, the truth had been uncovered, the mess cleared away. But it was the quiet whisper, a nagging feeling that the storm hadn't fully passed. Sophia and I had found our rhythm again, and despite the turbulent history that had almost torn us apart, we were now closer than ever. Her understanding, her quiet strength, gave me a peace I never thought I'd have, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Maybe it was because I had spent so many years with my life in flux, never knowing who to trust, who was lying to me, who was truly on my side. Perhaps it was that fear of history repeating itself, of slipping back into that dark, twisting world of betrayal and manipulation. I couldn't let go of the thought that something else was coming. And then it happened. The message. It was a simple text message, just a single line. I need to see you. It was from Claire, the one person I thought was gone for good, the one person who had once shattered everything I held dear. I stared at the message for a long time, the words burning into my mind. What more could she possibly want from me? What more could she take? Sophia sensed the shift in me, the same way she always had. She didn't need to ask what it was about, but she did anyway. Her voice was calm but firm. "What's going on?" I told her about the message, and for the first time in a long while, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. She had always trusted me, always believed in my judgment, but this was different. Claire's shadow loomed large, and even now, after everything, the past wasn't fully buried. "You don't have to see her," Sophia said, her tone a mix of caution and concern. "Whatever she wants, it can't be good." I stood there, torn. I knew she was right. Yet there was that pull, that need to know once and for all what had driven Claire to this point. Was there more to the story? Was there something deeper I hadn't uncovered? "I have to know," I said quietly, almost to myself. Sophia hesitated, her fingers brushing my arm. "If you do this, you're doing it for you. Not for her, not for anyone else. Just remember that." I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure if I could keep that promise. I had already crossed so many lines with Claire before. This time, I needed to make sure I didn't get lost in her web again. The meeting. The location was a small, run-down coffee shop at the edge of town. A place where people went to hide, to disappear. It was the kind of place where secrets were exchanged under the guise of casual conversation. I walked in and immediately spotted Claire sitting at a corner table, her back to the window. She looked older, more worn, but still the same woman I had once loved. She didn't look up when I sat down. There was no recognition in her eyes, only a quiet resignation. The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, she spoke, her voice, soft, almost fragile. "I never wanted this, you know." Her eyes were locked on the table, as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. "I didn't want to hurt you." I studied her carefully, searching for the truth in her words. Was she genuinely remorseful, or was this just another manipulation? There had been so many false apologies over the years, so many promises broken. Then, "Why did you?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "Why did you destroy everything?" Her gaze lifted to meet mine, but there was no malice in her eyes, just an emptiness that seemed to consume her. "I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I thought I could fix it all, but I couldn't. And now it's all falling apart." She paused, her voice catching in her throat. "I've lost everything, and I don't know how to fix it." I sat there for a long moment, unsure of how to respond. The bitterness I once felt was gone, replaced by something colder, something more dangerous. I didn't pity her anymore, but I also didn't hate her. "I simply couldn't afford to. What do you want from me?" I asked, my tone sharp but controlled. Claire swallowed hard before speaking again. "I need your help. I've made mistakes, too many of them. But they're after me. The people who ruined your life, they're still after me. I don't know how to get out." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, not really. She was begging for protection. But this wasn't about saving her anymore. It was about stopping the cycle from repeating itself. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice steady. "And you've made your bed. You'll have to lie in it." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't try to convince me any further. She stood up slowly, her shoulders slumped, defeated. She didn't even look back as she left the cafe. The final twist the next few days were a blur. A new war. The realization hit me like a freight train. The battle was far from over. I had been living under the false impression that the betrayal had ended with Claire, that once the secrets were out, I could finally walk away, leave the past behind, and rebuild. But the truth was, the conspiracy she was involved in was far-reaching, more intricate and insidious than I had ever imagined. I spent the next few days sifting through the papers and documents I had gathered. There were connections to a shadowy network of powerful individuals, all linked to the corporate world. Some of them were figures I had crossed paths with before, unknowingly, as I worked my way up the ranks. Others were entirely new faces, faces that held the keys to the destruction of everything I had built. But there was one name that kept cropping up: Richard Mercer. He was the man who had almost destroyed me years ago, the one who had used Claire to orchestrate my downfall. He had slunk into the shadows after Claire's arrest, but something told me he wasn't done yet. The evidence I'd uncovered pointed to Mercer as the mastermind behind it all, the puppet master pulling the strings, behind Claire and the others. I hadn't been the only one manipulated. Claire, too, was a pawn in a larger game, but even knowing this didn't give me any peace. It only raised the stakes. I couldn't let Claire's final betrayal be the end of my story. I had to go after Mercer. This time, no one would walk away unscathed. The trap I knew what I had to do. The first step was to get to Mercer. He had spent years covering his tracks, hiding behind layers of legal loopholes and false identities. But if I had learned anything over the past year, it was that people like him, people who believed they could manipulate the world, always made mistakes. They got careless, and when they did, I would be there. I hired a private investigator, a man named Lucas Knight, who had a reputation for being able to dig up even the most well-hidden secrets. We worked in tandem, pulling together everything we could on Mercer. The deeper we dug, the more disturbing it became. Mercer wasn't just a businessman. He was a power broker, an architect of schemes that reached into politics, the media, and even law enforcement. He had created a fortress of lies and deception, and I was determined to tear it down. After weeks of tracking down leads and gathering evidence, Lucas came to me with a plan. It was risky, dangerously so, but it was the only way to draw Mercer out. We needed to make him think that the walls were closing in, that his secrets were about to be exposed, and the best way to do that was to leak a part of what we knew. Just enough to get his attention, we crafted a fake document, one that appeared to implicate him in a major scandal. The plan was to send it anonymously to the media, with just enough breadcrumbs leading back to him. We knew he'd panic, that he'd take the bait and try to cover his tracks. The goal was simple: expose him and force him into the open. The night we sent the leak, I could almost feel the tension in the air. It was a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than ever. But as the days passed and I saw Mercer's empire beginning to crack, I knew we had made the right move. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the call came. "Mercer's on the move," Lucas's voice crackled through the phone. "He's heading to the old warehouse on Sycamore Street. We need to act fast." The confrontation, I wasted no time. I gathered a small team of trusted allies: Lucas, a few tech experts, and a former detective who had once been on Mercer's payroll. Together, we made our way to the warehouse. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it, the final showdown. I wasn't just going to confront Mercer. I was going to make sure he paid for everything he had done. We arrived just as nightfall set in, the air thick with fog and the distant sound of traffic. The warehouse loomed before us like a forgotten relic, its rusty doors and broken windows, adding to the sense of decay that permeated the area. It was the perfect place for Mercer to make his last stand. We moved in quickly, making our way through the shadows, positioning ourselves around the building. I could hear voices inside, low, urgent whispers. It wasn't just Mercer in there were others. His associates, perhaps, or people who had worked for him in the past. Either way, I knew I couldn't afford to hesitate. The plan was simple: get in, confront Mercer, and expose him once and for all. But as we approached the entrance, something felt off. The usual sense of control I had over these situations was slipping away. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap of our own. I motioned to Lucas to hold back and listened intently. The whispers inside had stopped. Then, in the eerie silence, I heard it. a creaking sound from above, followed by the unmistakable scrape of metal against concrete. The unseen hand. The cold, damp air of the abandoned building pressed against my skin, but the chill I felt wasn't from the environment. It was the realization that everything I had believed, everything I had fought for, had been a lie. Claire's words hung in the air, dense with implication, as my mind scrambled to process the gravity of what she had just revealed. He's never been the real enemy. The weight of those words settled heavily in my chest. I had thought I understood the depths of Mercer's betrayal, but now it seemed that he was merely a puppet, another pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game. The sting of betrayal, once sharp and all-consuming, now felt like an echo as I tried to understand who the true puppet master was. I strained against the ropes binding my wrists, my thoughts racing. Claire moved closer, but she wasn't the calculating, manipulative woman I remembered. There was a kind of fragility to her, now like a cracked mirror reflecting the person she had once been. She seemed unsure, her gaze flickering between me and the shadows behind her, as if she were waiting for something, or someone. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice rough from the disorienting blow. "Who else is there? Who's pulling the strings?" Claire took a slow breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "You think it's Mercer, but he was just an instrument. A man with ambition, yes, but he was never the one in charge. There's someone else, someone much more powerful, and they've been watching you." I felt a chill run down my spine. Watching me. The words felt like a threat, but there was a deeper sense of truth buried beneath them. I had known for a long time that I wasn't just dealing with a personal vendetta. This had been something much larger, an intricate web of lies and manipulation that had entangled my life from the beginning. But who had been orchestrating it all? Claire hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to reveal the full truth. Then, with a shaky breath, she spoke. It's Richard's father. The one who's been behind everything." Her voice trembled as she spoke his name. "Jonathan Mercer. He's the one who set this entire chain of events into motion." Jonathan Mercer. The name resonated in my mind like a distant drumbeat, echoing against the walls of my understanding. I'd never known much about Richard's father. His name had never been on my radar. But now, with the pieces starting to align, everything made sense. Jonathan Mercer had been the shadow behind the curtain, pulling the strings and manipulating his son to do his bidding. I had been a pawn in his game for far longer than I had realized. And Claire? She had been just another victim, caught in the web that Jonathan had carefully spun, just as I had been. I tried to focus on what Claire was saying, but my head was still spinning. "Why are you telling me this? You didn't want me to know this before. Why now?" Claire's face was a mixture of guilt and something more vulnerable, fear. Fear of the man she had been entangled with for so long. "Because he's coming for you. He's coming for both of us." Before I could respond, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from behind Claire. She froze, her eyes widening in terror. She looked over her shoulder, and I followed her gaze, heart pounding in my chest. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man who moved with the kind of controlled, deliberate confidence that only comes with power. Tall, with sharp features and an air of authority that radiated from him like a storm cloud waiting to break, he stepped into the light. Jonathan Mercer. He was older than I'd imagined, graying hair at the temples, but his presence was every bit as formidable as I'd feared. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was no mistaking the disdain in his gaze. "I'm impressed," Jonathan said, his voice smooth and cold, like polished steel. "I didn't think you'd make it this far, but now you're here, and it's time we had a conversation." I tried to steady my breathing, my mind racing to formulate a plan. He was the one pulling all the strings. He was the mastermind behind everything. The one who had set Claire against me, the one who had nearly destroyed me. And now it seemed he was ready to finish what had been started. Claire stepped back slightly, as if trying to distance herself from the confrontation. I could feel the tension thickening, like a storm on the horizon. Jonathan looked at Claire for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to me, his lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't blame her," he said, his voice soft but laced with menace. "She's just another casualty of your little war. You both are. But it's not over yet." His words sent a ripple of dread through me. What was he planning? Was he going to kill us both? Or was there something worse, something far more insidious on the horizon? I had been through hell, and yet the worst was still to call me. A new hunt. The gunfire had barely stopped echoing when the room fell into an eerie silence. The sudden rush of adrenaline made it feel like the world had frozen. I was still on the floor, disoriented, trying to process what had just happened. The smoke from the gunshots hung in the air, thick and suffocating, while the scent of burning metal and powder lingered. I slowly raised my head, my pulse still racing as I tried to make sense of what had just transpired. There were several bodies, on the ground, mercenaries, or at least that's what I assumed. They were wearing tactical gear, and their movements had been too coordinated for them to be random thugs. The room had become a war zone, but in the middle of the chaos, I saw the most important thing. Jonathan Mercer was gone. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. Claire was still standing at the far end of the room, her hands raised in a gesture that seemed almost pleading. She was shaken, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was something else in them. Relief. Or perhaps it was the fading remnants of a fear she had carried for far too long. A voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. "Are you all right?" I turned to see the source of the voice, a woman, mid-30s, with short black hair and piercing blue eyes. She was dressed in dark, tactical gear, moving with the precision of someone who had spent their life in the shadows. I nodded, trying to steady my breath, though every instinct screamed at me to run after Mercer. Whoever these people were, they had just interrupted my final confrontation with him, and I wasn't sure whether I should be grateful or furious. The woman surveyed the scene quickly, then focused on me. "We need to move. He won't be gone for long." "Who are you?" I managed, still trying to process the shock of the situation. "I'm Agent Harper. We've been tracking Jonathan Mercer for months," she said, her voice calm but urgent. This operation was compromised, but it's far from over. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Months of work, everything coming down to this. But there was no time to dwell on it. I glanced over at Claire, who seemed to be coming back to herself. She had already pulled herself together, standing straighter, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. I didn't know what to think of her anymore. She had been a part of this, had been complicit in the lies and manipulations. But now, there was a sense of desperation in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. She wasn't the same woman who had betrayed me. Not entirely. "We need answers," I said, turning to Agent Harper, "and I'm not walking out of here until I get them." Agent Harper didn't flinch. "You will, but you're not alone in this anymore." I looked over at Claire. She seemed to understand that her role in this twisted narrative was far from over. She was tangled in something far bigger than herself, but I could see the flicker of resolve in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she understood the magnitude of what she had done and wanted to help bring it all down. Or maybe she was trying to save herself. Either way, I knew we had to stick together if we were going to bring Jonathan Mercer and his empire to its knees. Harper gestured for us to follow her, and we moved quickly through the dimly lit hallways of the warehouse. The sense of urgency was palpable, and I could feel the weight of the moment hanging over us. This was it, the moment of truth. We made our way to a concealed room at the back of the warehouse. The walls were lined with monitors showing various locations, high-end hotels, corporate offices, even private residences. It was a control center, one I could only assume had been tracking Mercer's every move. "There's more going on here than you realize," Harper said, her eyes scanning the screens. "Jonathan Mercer doesn't just run his own operations. He's been working with a network of powerful individuals, people in positions of influence who have been covering his tracks. Some of them are connected to government agencies, law enforcement, even major corporations. He's been using them for years to keep his empire hidden, and now he's more dangerous than ever." I swallowed hard, trying to digest the enormity of what I was hearing. "So this isn't just about Claire and me. This is bigger than I thought." Harper nodded. "Much bigger. But you have to understand, you've been in the crosshairs for far longer than you think. Mercer doesn't just want you out of the way. He wants control, and you were a threat to that control. The people you've been investigating aren't just random criminals. They're part of something much deeper, and Mercer's running out of time." "Time for what?" Claire asked, her voice trembling with something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear or realization? Harper turned toward her, her expression tight. "Mercer's made one mistake. He underestimated you. You may not know it yet, but you have more power in this situation. The final push." The sound of pounding footsteps echoed in the dark hallway as we made our way through the warehouse. I could feel the tension in the air like a live wire, thrumming with the impending danger. Harper led the way, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Claire was right behind me, her breathing heavy, her steps hesitant but determined. We reached a heavy steel door at the back of the building, and Harper slammed her fist against the panel next to it. A loud click followed, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow alleyway bathed in dim streetlight. Outside, the air felt colder, the city's hum distant and muffled by the thickness of the night. But as we stepped into the alley, the urgency of the situation hit me full force. Jonathan Mercer wasn't just running, he was plotting his next move, and whatever it was coming fast. Harper didn't waste time. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice low and urgent. "He's got a safe house not far from here. If we move fast enough, we can catch him before he disappears again." I nodded, the fire of determination lighting in my chest. The rage that had simmered in me since the moment I found out about Claire's betrayal was now a cold, controlled fury. But now, it was more than just vengeance. It was justice. I had a chance to stop Mercer from destroying anyone else, to end this twisted game he had been playing for years. We were in it together now, me, Claire, and Harper. Whether it was for redemption, survival, or something else, it didn't matter. There was no turning back. We moved swiftly through the streets, weaving in and out of shadows. The city was alive, but it felt empty, like we were the only ones, aware of the dark secrets lingering just beneath the surface. Harper led us to a nondescript van parked on the corner, its engine running. She glanced at me one last time before sliding into the driver's seat. Claire climbed in beside her, and I followed, taking a deep breath as the door slammed shut. The van sped off, the city's lights streaking past in a blur of motion. Harper didn't say much, her focus entirely on the road, but I could feel her calculated presence. She was a woman who knew how to handle danger. I glanced at Claire, who was sitting across from me, her hands clenched in her lap. Her eyes darted, to me briefly, but she didn't say a word. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, what she was feeling. Was she still the same woman who had betrayed me? Or had she truly come to her senses, understanding the magnitude of everything that had happened? The questions churned in my mind, but they had to wait. There was too much at stake right now. The van pulled into a narrow alley near an industrial complex. Harper cut the engine, and the three of us exited quickly, moving under the cover of darkness. We approached a small, inconspicuous door on the side of a rundown building. Harper knocked once, and a familiar voice answered from inside. Agent. Harper. About time. The door swung open to reveal a man dressed in civilian clothes but with a military stance. He nodded at us as we filed in, scanning the area with practiced eyes. He seemed to be expecting us, his demeanor calm but alert. "This is it," Harper said quietly. "This is where we end it." The man, who I learned was named Cole, led us through the dimly lit hallway past several reinforced doors. He spoke, in hushed tones. "Mercer's holed up inside. He's got a team with him. But we've got the upper hand this time. The safe house is compromised. He doesn't know we're here." My pulse quickened. This was it. We were going to confront him, and this time we were prepared. No more games, no more tricks. Cole stopped in front of a steel door at the end of the hallway. "Ready?" I didn't hesitate. "Let's do this." We moved in fast, clearing the corners of the room with military precision. Inside, the scene was almost anticlimactic. Mercer was seated at a desk, papers scattered around him, but his eyes were sharp, like a predator sensing danger. And the moment we entered, he stood up, his hand instinctively going to the gun at his side. "You," he said, his voice low and venomous. "I should have known it would come to this." I stepped forward, my voice steady but filled with years of pain. "This ends tonight, Mercer. You've hurt too many people, and now I'm here to make sure you can't hurt anyone else." Mercer's lips curled into a cold smile, but there was no amusement in it. "You think you've won? You think you can stop this? I've been untouchable for years. What makes you think tonight's any different?" I was tired of his arrogance. Tired of the lies, the manipulation. "Because I've seen the truth. You're nothing but a puppet, Mercer, and you're out of strings." For a moment, the room was still. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, a movement. Quick, sudden. Mercer's hand shot toward his gun, but before he could pull the trigger, Cole's weapon was already in his face. A new chapter. Mercer was handcuffed and escorted out of the safe house by Cole and Harper. His silence spoke volumes. He was no longer the formidable force he once was. The swagger, the endless stream of lies, the arrogance, all gone. His defeat was inevitable, and he knew it. But I wasn't sure if it was truly over. Not yet. There were too many loose ends still hanging in the air, too many shadows left behind. I stood there in the dim room, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly ebbing away, leaving behind a sense of quiet exhaustion. The tension, the need to act, was gone, but it felt hollow, like an emptiness that could never truly be filled. Claire was still by the door, her expression unreadable, her eyes locked on the ground as if she was processing everything that had happened. She hadn't said a word since we confronted Mercer, not a single word of apology or explanation. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to break it. Not yet. Harper approached me, her movements purposeful, her eyes sharp and calculating. "We'll get Mercer into protective custody. From here on, he's our problem. But you need to think about what's next." I nodded, unsure what that even meant. What was next? Would my life just return to normal? Could it? "You're still in danger," Harper continued. "Mercer may be gone, but the network he was part of doesn't disappear overnight. There are people out there, people you don't want to meet." I glanced at Claire, then back at Harper. "What does that mean for me? For us?" Harper's gaze flickered to Claire, who was still standing in the doorway, distant and lost in thought. "It means you're not alone in this. You'll have our protection. But we can't be everywhere. You need to be prepared for what's coming next." I felt the weight of her words. The danger wasn't gone. It never was. "Are you saying I should just trust you?" After everything that's happened? I asked, my voice sharp. There was too much uncertainty in the air. Too much left unsaid. I needed answers, real answers. Harper paused, her eyes studying me. We're not here to make friends, but we're here to stop Mercer's empire from spreading any further. If you want to get out of this alive, you'll have to decide which side you're on. The question is, what are you going to do now? I looked at Claire again, her posture still tense, her silence a question in itself. It was impossible to ignore her presence in the room. She had been a part of this mess too, a key player in the game of deceit. But somewhere along the way, I had started to wonder if she had been just as trapped in this twisted game as I had been. "How much did you know, Claire?" I asked, my voice softer now, the edge of anger fading into something more dangerous. The betrayal was still fresh, but now there was a curiosity building inside me. Was she complicit, or was she a pawn, too? Her eyes finally met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a flicker of vulnerability in them. She opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. I didn't know how deep it went. Not at first. But when I found out, when I realized who I was dealing with, it was already too late. I tried to get out, but he wouldn't let me. Her voice trailed off, and I could tell she was struggling with something. Guilt? Fear? Or was it regret? I wanted to feel angry, to scream at her for everything she had done, but instead I felt something else stir in me, something darker, more unsettling. Could I still trust her? Could I ever trust her again? Harper seemed to sense the tension in the air and took a step back, giving us space. You've got choices to make. The truth isn't always clear, and the path ahead isn't easy. But remember, you can't walk it alone. Claire glanced at me again, her face a mixture of desperation and something else, something I couldn't quite name. I didn't want this, she whispered. I never wanted any of this. I was trying to survive. I thought I could play the game without losing myself. But I lost everything. I lost you. I studied her carefully, every word a knife to my heart. Was it remorse? Or was she simply playing her last card? I don't know what's real anymore, I said, the weight of it all pressing down on me. You and Mercer, it's all so twisted. I don't even know what to believe. There was a long pause. Then Claire, in a voice barely above a whisper, spoke again. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in what felt like forever. The woman I had married was still in there somewhere, hidden beneath the layers of lies and betrayal. But was it enough? Was it possible to rebuild anything? After everything that had been broken? I didn't know. And as Harper moved to open the door, signaling it was time to go, I realized one thing. My journey wasn't over yet. Mercer was down, but the war was far from finished. The crossroads. The cool air outside the safe house felt sharp against my skin as we emerged into the night. The city was quiet, but I couldn't shake the tension that clung to everything, like a heavy fog. Mercer was gone for now, but the aftermath of everything that had unfolded still hung over me like a dark cloud. I had faced him, confronted him, and walked away with what I needed. But as the night swallowed us whole, I realized that everything had changed, and the hardest part was yet to come. Claire walked beside me, her steps slow, hesitant. She hadn't said anything since we left the safe house, and I wasn't sure what to make of her silence. Was she waiting for some kind of resolution from me, some sign that things could go back to normal? I had no answers. I didn't even know what normal was anymore. Harper was a few paces ahead, keeping a careful watch on our surroundings. I could sense the professionalism in her. She was always alert, always thinking 2 steps ahead. But tonight, it wasn't just Mercer's empire we were fighting. It was everything that had come before. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. It all weighed down on me like 1,000 tons of stone, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to lift it. We reached the car and Harper held the door open for me, her expression unreadable. Claire lingered a moment longer, her eyes darting toward me as if unsure of how to proceed. I couldn't offer her the comfort she was looking for, not yet. Not with everything still unresolved. "Where do we go from here?" Claire asked, her voice soft, almost fragile in the stillness of the night. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I climbed into the back seat of the car and looked out at the darkened streets. The city felt empty now, like the pulse of life had drained out of it, leaving only the remnants behind. The silence was suffocating, and the weight of my choices pressed heavily on me. "I don't know," I finally said, my voice hoarse. "I wish I could tell you it was going to be okay, but I don't know what that looks like anymore." Harper slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, breaking the stillness. "We're not going to get answers tonight. The only thing we can do is move forward, one step at a time." I nodded, even though I didn't believe it. Moving forward felt impossible when everything was still so broken. We drove through the empty streets in silence, the low hum of the engine the only sound in the car. Claire was still sitting beside me, her gaze fixed out the window, her thoughts far away. I couldn't even bring myself to ask her what she was thinking. It didn't matter, not yet. After a few minutes, Harper turned onto a dark, winding road leading out of the city. "There's someone who needs to hear about Mercer," she said, her tone businesslike. "We've got some work to do, but after that we'll figure out what happens next." "Who's the person?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. "Someone who can help you make sense of the mess Mercer left behind," Harper said vaguely, "and someone who can help make sure it doesn't come back to bite you." The uncertainty in her voice made me uneasy. I could tell this person was important, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they would lead us into another labyrinth of secrets and lies. I wasn't sure how much more I could take. Minutes later, we arrived at a nondescript building tucked away on the outskirts of town. It looked like any other warehouse, dark, weathered, and quiet. But there was something about it that felt different, something that told me this wasn't just another stop in the endless series of moves we had been making. This was the final piece. Harper led us inside, and we were greeted by a man sitting at a desk. He was older than me, with sharp eyes and an air of authority that commanded respect. His face was lined with experience, and his demeanor was calm, even in the face of the storm we had just weathered. "Agent Harper," the man said, standing as we entered, "and this must be the man who's finally decided to clean up the mess Mercer left behind." I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm here because I need answers, and I need to know what comes next." The man studied me for a long moment before speaking again. "The truth is, you've been a pawn in a much larger game than you realized. But now that you know what you're dealing with, you can either let it consume you or fight back." "I'm done being a pawn," I said firmly, my voice carrying the weight of everything I had been through. "I'm ready to fight." The man's lips curled into a slight smile. "Good. Then we have work to do. Mercer wasn't the only piece on the board, and I'll bet you anything he wasn't working alone." My heart sank. I had known there was more to this, more than just Mercer pulling the strings, but hearing it confirmed brought a new wave of dread crashing over me. I wasn't just dealing with a corrupt businessman anymore. I was up against a network, an intricate web of power. The depths of the web, the room felt suffocating, the air thick with the weight of everything that had led us to this moment. The man behind the desk, whose name I still hadn't learned, studied us with a look that spoke of years of experience in this murky world. I felt like I was being pulled deeper into something I wasn't ready for, but there was no turning back now. Before we get started, the man said, breaking the silence, I need to know one thing. Are you willing to sacrifice everything? Because that's what this is going to take. If you're not prepared for that, then you should walk away now. His words struck like a punch to the gut. Sacrifice everything? Could I really walk away from it all? I had already lost so much. My trust, my peace of mind, my relationship. What more could I give up? I looked over at Claire, standing quietly, beside me. She didn't meet my eyes, but I could sense the weight of her own decision looming over her. She had been a part of all this, whether she wanted to admit it or not. Could she really handle the truth? Could I handle it? I swallowed hard, the decision settling in my chest like a stone. I'm in, I said, my voice firm, even though my insides churned with uncertainty. I need to know who else is involved. I need to know how deep this goes. The man nodded slowly, clearly weighing my words. You're not just after Mercer, then. This is bigger than that, and it won't be pretty. I braced myself for what was to come. What more could I learn about the twisted web I was entangled in? He slid a folder across the desk to me. I took it hesitantly, feeling its weight like an omen. Inside were names, several of them, all with their own histories and connections to Mercer. Some I recognized. Others were completely foreign to me. I sifted through the papers, each name more unsettling than the last. High-profile business figures, politicians, even people in law enforcement. It was clear that Mercer's empire was not just built on illegal deals. It was a carefully crafted network of power that spanned across every corner of society. The question now is, the man continued, leaning forward with intensity, what's your next move? Do you go after each one of these individuals, or do you take down the entire system? I felt a rising tide of anger, resentment. They had manipulated me, used me as a pawn in their game, and now I was supposed to choose how to dismantle it all. How do you even begin to fight something so vast, so entrenched in every facet of society? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'll start by finding out who is at the top, who's pulling the strings behind Mercer. The man gave a small, approving nod. You're on the right path. But be careful. These people are ruthless. If you show any weakness, any hesitation, they'll take advantage of it. The words hung in the air like a warning. I could feel the chill creeping down my spine. The stakes were higher than I had imagined. This wasn't just about taking down one man. This was a battle for my life, for everything I cared about. Claire shifted beside me, her voice barely audible. What happens to us after all of this? When the dust settles, what do we have left? I didn't know how to answer her. Could we rebuild anything from the ashes? Could I ever trust her again after everything that had happened? She had been as much a part of this as Mercer, though in different ways. She was tangled in the web, but had she been a victim too? Or was it all just a game to her? The man's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. You'll need a team. People who can help you gather intel, people who are willing to get their hands dirty. I nodded, my mind racing. I was in deeper than I had ever been, and now the only way out was through. Let's start assembling the team. I need to know everything about these people, and I need to know who I can trust. Harper, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, stepped forward. I've got some contacts in the right places. We'll get you what you need. She was right. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. But with her by my side, and maybe Claire, if she was willing to prove herself, I had to believe there was a chance to get to the truth, to bring down the people who had ruined my life. The man behind the desk handed me another file. This one, marked with the words, Project Phi. The contents inside were sparse but alarming. Photographs of high-ranking officials, encrypted messages, and a list of locations. It seemed like Mercer's network had plans stretching far beyond mere financial manipulation. Project V is the key, the man said. If you want to know who is truly in charge, you need to follow the trail. It'll lead you right to them. I glanced at Claire again, her face etched with regret. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something. Guilt, fear, maybe even determination. But it was quickly masked by the cold distance she had built between us. What's our next step?